Basically, the current world. Then you are requiring that they do for assistance. Also with sort
Being 7 o'clock, I would like to call the Thursday, September 28th, 2017 Wilton Board of Education regular meeting to order. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Are there any questions, comments on the agenda? I would actually like to make one amendment to the agenda, and I will explain it further when we get to the board chair's report. But I'll be asking for everyone's acceptance of my stepping down as chairman this evening for business reasons as well as some personal reasons. And so consequently, I'd like to add to the action items as item number 3, a vote of a new slate of chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. I've asked Lucille to be ready for that, so hopefully that will all move smoothly. So with that amendment, I'm making the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we now move on to comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board always has an opportunity for people to speak. Is there anybody here that would like to say anything? Yes, please come forward, state your name. And you have a maximum of 2 minutes.
Should I take a seat?
Please.
Sure. So my name is Jung-Soo Kim. I've been a resident of Wilton for a little over 14 years. I have a child in the high school, Middlebrook and Cider Mill. So we have some student data privacy concerns, and it kind of came to a fore because one of my children was asked to log into a particular website as part of his regular schoolwork. So my husband and I both researched the site, and we were unhappy that we could not find information about who operated the website, who owned the website. There was no information about the operations or the ownership, so we were not able to contact anybody to find out what kind of privacy or user agreements that they had. So I contacted Fran Comper, and I discussed some of my concerns with her, and she explained to me that all the operators and contractors were covered by a student data privacy law that had been enacted in 2016. So I read through the law. And in my conversation with Fran Comper, I was also a little concerned because while Wilton does vet all of the operators and contractors, they do not vet the websites that our children are asked to log on to as part of their schoolwork. And I explained to her that I thought it was a problem, and she commented that there were so many websites that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for the school district to vet all the websites. I feel like that is a little loophole that is in this particular state law. So as my comment and question, I understand that the school district is actually the customer, not the student or parent, even though we do have some legal rights under the data privacy laws. So my question is, how long do we ask that the contractors and operators retain students' data, whether it's de-identified, any student-generated content, and if we do ask them to delete data. Also, I noticed that there were some rights as parents or students or guardians to request that we review the data that has been collected on the students and the generated content. So I'm wondering what the procedures are to request that information for our review. And then finally, if there is an awareness or some effort being made to make sure that the websites and the data collection agencies that is being used for schoolwork have been properly vetted and is properly protecting our children's information. I feel like as the school board, we entrust the education of our children to you. And because of how complex online existence has gotten, we're now entrusting you to protect the privacy and the data of our children. And I feel that if a sitting senator can get caught liking a pornographic tweet, like, all of our children's information is being recorded, all the emails, you know, any content that they produce as part of their schoolwork. And I just want to make sure that we are aware of how much of our children's information data we're exposing.
Great, thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you. You have a follow-up on that?
Absolutely. In fact, Fran is part of her presentation update can speak to the work that she's been doing around working with vendors whose apps we purchase.
Great.
And then we can follow up more thoroughly
Thank you.
on that.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing no one, we move on to the consent agenda. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at that?
Yes.
Any questions, comments? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Board Chair's report. So I'll be brief. Acting as your chair these past 6 years has been one of the highest honors of my life. There's no question about it. I love doing it. I love working with each and every one of you. As many of you know, over the past 6 months, my business life has gotten incredibly busy. I now have a child that I'm chasing all over the country for field hockey, and I don't feel I have the time to put into the chairmanship role that I believe it deserves. And I feel very strongly about the work that we've done. I feel strongly about the collaboration that we've all put in together, and I feel strongly about making sure that everyone at the table has a voice at all times. Not being able to put 110% into it is why I'm stepping down as chair at the end of tonight and ask that we vote somebody else in. I think it's an appropriate time. Ideally, I would have liked to have gone through the end of November, but I know what my timetable looks like over the next couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, I hop on a plane at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, so now's the right time. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate working with all of you. And with that, I move on.
How do you follow that?
So,
Okay, well,
Dr. Smith,
it's a pleasure.
likewise.
Always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I have a number of things to report.
Kind of sets the tone, doesn't it?
Gathering myself here. If you saw Good Morning Wilton today, then you learned that one of our 8th graders, Annika Baguvatula, was named one of the 10 finalists around the country in the Discovery Education 3M Young Scientist Challenge. So this is a huge accomplishment for this young lady, and a wonderful recognition for her family, for this town. And I think something that actually Laura and I were just speaking about moments ago was the need to invite more young ladies into the sciences and technology and really encourage that here in the district. And so, you know, Annika stands out as a shining example, so I wanted to recognize her tonight.
When she goes to Minnesota now.
And she was up to Minnesota.
Off to Minnesota for the finals. It's really fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
great story.
tough challenge. It's really to be one of the top 10 in the country. It's just phenomenal.
We received, not too long ago, the PSAT NMSQ results, and I'm happy to report we have 23 commended scholars and 3 national merit semifinalists. Mia Rufinot, James Trentos, and Michael Wallace, who are all seniors at the high school. So we want to congratulate all of them on their extraordinary success in that. Wanted to welcome 2 new faces at the board table. We want to welcome Andrea Leonardi, who's joining us for her very first board meeting as Assistant Superintendent for Special Services. It's been a pleasure getting to know Andrea so far this summer and watching her work. She's a tremendous asset to this district and will do fine work. So delighted to have you. We also want to welcome Ann Kelly Lentz, who is doing double duty, both as Chief Financial Officer for the town of Wilton and now serving as in interim capacity here at the board. And Ann and I have gotten to know each other quite a bit through the spring as we were beginning the transition and through the summer. And she is in deep, I would say, at this point. So we'll be hearing from Ann, as we move through the year, and she's already been working on getting us squared away for our budget. So welcome to the two of you, and thank you. I also want to take a moment and recognize each of our very fine school leaders who are sitting behind the board table. It's been a very, very busy summer, and these folks, Kathy and Jen, Lauren and Bob and Don, and their colleagues, Fran and Eric, who you'll hear from later today, have been really working very closely with the staffs, preparing for the school opening and then launching the opening of school. This month has been a blur. It's been really positive, I think, all the way around. Definitely not without its hiccups, but it's been a really, I think, from my experience, the best start so far here in Wilton, and so we're delighted to have them, continue to work with us. I want to call out Kathy and the staff at Miller Driscoll for their heroic efforts of working through an occupied renovation. We are at the end, as I'm sure Glenn will fill us in about, but you can't understate the significance of their positive attitude and flexibility. And then for all of them and our staff included, as you know, and you'll hear some more details shortly, we launched a pretty significant digital learning endeavor a few short weeks ago, and while I would say when you think about the scale of that project, it's been very smooth. It certainly hasn't been without its hiccups. And so we've had, in various places, connectivity issues. We've had issues with Google, issues with NWEA, and all through those various hiccups, our staff is just kind of focused on the positive and bent where they needed to bend, and are remaining, upbeat about it. So I'm really couldn't be happier about that. Wanted to call everyone's attention to our next meeting, which will take place at the newly renovated Miller Driscoll School on October 12th. Prior to that meeting, from 5 to 7, we will have a community open house. So those notifications will go out either by late tomorrow or first part of the week next week, and we'll let everybody know that there's an opportunity for community members to come in, tour the school, and see what an incredible investment's been made in renovating that school. The enrollment this year was a surprise. We are about 72 students above our projected. And when Chuck and I looked at those a while ago, most of those students were new to the community. So we are about plus 10 students in kindergarten, plus 8 in grade 2. Cider Mill is where we saw a substantial hit in both grade 3 and grade 4. We had 14 and 22 new students respectively. 15 students in grade 6 and 11 students in grade 7, and then 21 unanticipated students in grade 9. So on the other side of the balance sheet, we also had a negative variance in grade 12 of negative 19. But on the whole, that I would consider to be very positive news in terms of enrollment and the projections.
What was our, if you don't know off the top of your head, that's okay, but what was our projected drop for this year?
It was about 90.
Okay.
And so our actual drop on the numbers in front of me is 25 from last year to this year.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So the curve is flattening. Right, and then also just to make the board aware, we'll have representatives from NESDEC here on the October 12th meeting to present a summary of their findings from the facilities review that we conducted. We reviewed that with the Business Operations Committee meeting this morning. And a couple of the key findings. Some of the questions we had was, considering some of the enrollment trends, would we have any opportunity to either regrade band to actually close a facility? And the reports back were, our enrollment isn't going to be such where we'd ever be able to close a school. So we'll have to continue forward with the capital maintenance plans. The rebanding of grade levels was also not recommended. In terms of looking at where there would be space capacity, they singled out Middlebrook and suggested that there's a wing at Middlebrook adjacent to the front parking lot where if sometime in the future we wanted to repurpose that space, that would probably be the best place to do that, whether we wanted to move offices, give space to the town. I was thinking as we're looking for space for an alternative high school, that might be a place to consider given the changes in enrollment. There was also opportunity here at the high school, but the feedback simply speaking was it would require a lot more retrofitting to do that here as opposed to Middlebrook if we so chose. So you'll get the full report on the 12th, and then we can pursue our next round of plans. So
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. Committee reports?
I attended the first Digital Advisory Committee meeting that took place about a week or so ago, and I would comment more on it, but Fran is on the agenda tonight. She'll give us all an update, but that's very honored to be part of that group, considering my lack of knowledge in that area. So I'm learning as we go, too, so it's a good experience for me. Teaching and learning, we had a meeting earlier this month. We approved a new economics textbook. The one that was in use was from 1997, and so if you can just imagine all the changes and what has happened in our world economy over that period of time, we were in desperate need of a new updated textbook. So we approved that, and it was already in the budget. So the timing of things was kind of out of order, but if you recall, we're moving towards the schedule where 6141s will be presented through the fall so that we have everything settled before we go into budget season, and we're aware of all of those things going into the budget season. So that new econ book. We also talked about some additional revisions to the 6141 policy and regulation, and that's on our agenda tonight too, but that's to include textbook changes and things like that. And another interesting thing that came up in discussion, a couple times over the last year, we had members of the community ask us for an inventory list of the textbooks that we use throughout the district, and we didn't have one. But there is work underway now to do that, to keep it all digitally stored. We talked about possibly barcoding the books and all of this, but it's a huge task because it's never been done before. So hopefully within the next few months we'll have a terrific inventory of all the resources that we're using in our classes, keeping in mind that the textbook is only one resource that any teacher refers to. There's a multitude of resources that a teacher uses. Is there anything else you want to add, Laura?
Yeah, we're going to have a busy fall looking at 6141s, and some of it is just changing courses that already exist. For example, the lower grades will be adjusting their science and social studies, and then the high school is adding a preview, an international literature class. Humanities is being changed. 10th grade social studies. I don't know if everyone remembers that the high school is changing the way they do social studies, so all the 10th graders will be taking contemporary global issues and followed by civics, and then every U.S. history will be for all 11th graders, so everyone will be taking it at the same time as their class. And there's also, we'll be seeing the next version of Project Lead the Way, and there's going to be a new Spanish conversational class, and also advanced public speaking. So I probably have forgotten something, but there's a lot. We'll be busy this fall hearing about the new classes and the new changes to curriculum as we go through our curriculum reviews.
Great. Thank you. Glenn?
Okay. Well, first, the building committee. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are slowly wrapping up, and it's anticipated that we met 2 weeks ago. And the work right now really is finishing touches on a bunch of areas, punch lists on things that have been missed, and it's the communication between the administration and Turner has been phenomenal. The phone system, I don't want to jinx it, but seems to be now up and working properly, and calls not being dropped over the last few days, I guess, right? Maybe 3 days of no drop calls, no. But those things happen. I mean, we're talking about a major, major project. And It's, the parking lot lights, we have discovered that the timer and switch for the parking lot lights are not working properly, and the lights were on at 1:30 Monday morning, all the parking lot lights over the weekend. Or Friday night, I was informed of that at the football game at Fairfield Ward by a couple of parents. Why are they burning all night? I don't know, but they were. So we got a timer problem that we're working on there. But there are no major concerns whatsoever that came out of our building committee meeting. It's now punch list and wrapping up all the books, getting warranties in place. We just yesterday received all the warranty documents for the roofing, and that's a process will continue probably through the end of the year, through the end of December. But hopefully by the end of December, Turner will be long gone, and it will be totally ours and totally done. From a budget standpoint, we are still at about a net $36 million project from the 50 that was approved for the bonding. And in that $36 million is another $1 million or so of contingency, so it may go even slightly lower than the 36, depending on any contingency needs, which, yeah, are still out there, a few of them. One of which may be, and I don't know how this is going to end up, but as the project was originally scoped, going back now 5 years, I guess, or more, when it began almost 6 years ago, when the conversations first began 6 years. One of the things that was not included in this building project was the library. And because it was not in the scope of work or the educational scope or the original plans, there was no opportunity to do anything as part of this building project that had been approved by the Board of Selectmen and bonded by the city, by the town, because it wasn't the scope of work. And we didn't really know what we wanted to do 6 years ago. The Learning Commons concept was relatively new and just beginning to take root and be talked about and discussed. So I've asked Kevin if he would, for that project, put together, a document or a recommendation that I could take to the Board of Selectmen outside of the scope of the project, since we came in where we did financially, when we got money, we have $1 million, to finish that work off at the same time or in short order as part of the same process. So we get the library done there. So we're waiting on that. It will require a special, movement by the Board of Selectmen to release the funds and authorize expense because it's not in the scope of the project. But I'll gladly undertake that as we can get it put together. So that still remains, it's still out there. It doesn't look bad, it's not awful and whatever, but it needs to be done. And hopefully we can get it done in relatively short order. So that's really pretty much it from the building perspective. Our next meeting will be on the same October 12th schedule. We're going to have to work it on our time because our meetings typically are at 5 o'clock, and that will conflict with the open house. So we'll work around that, and I'll get Chris, and we'll see if we can get everybody together to have a meeting. But at this point, the meetings really consist of invoice approvals, authorizing payments, and stuff like that. Work that's been done. I'm not concerned at all. There's still significant holdbacks on part of the payments that have gone to contractors to protect us for any future issues. We have control in that area. So I'm pleased.
How much are we still expecting from the state?
We have received $6 million of the approximately 7 that we anticipated already. So it's a good thing. We've got the bulk of it. We've got 2 tranches.
Is there any talk of that being withheld?
No, not that we have. That money was already authorized by the legislature some time ago. So it's been authorized, approved, and committed. So I don't anticipate, we were very fortunate in getting that. We've got the bulk of it. We have 2 tranches. We got 1 remaining, and that won't have that last bit will be sometime in coming, because that ties into the final wrap-up, the final audits of all the work that's done, final approvals and stuff like that. If in the punch list work there are things that qualify, that has to be added to it. So it'll be approximately $1 million remaining from the state at this point. So, and I'm not worried about that, because that's all been approved. Okay, we have 6 already. So $36 million is a good deal. I think it's good. It is if you haven't been to the school yet, I encourage you to do so. It just will put a smile on your face. Doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's bright, it's cheerful, it's clean, it's shiny, it's everything an elementary school should be.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
It really is. It's just great. Well, not me. I didn't do anything with chair the meetings. All the work Kathy and her group did all the work. Turner has done a phenomenal job on our behalf, absolutely, Mike Durier he's just, the whole staff, Jennifer, they've just been great. They really have. And it's been, you think about it, it's a really relatively smooth project that is now finished a good 3 to 4 months ahead of what our original schedule was. You know, we made a mid-course correction. If you recall, we weren't scheduled to be finished until the final moves at this Christmas break. So we're a good 4 months ahead of schedule. And it's just fantastic. So
wonderful. Thank you.
That. The Ops Committee met this morning for the first time this year. A number of items on the agenda, many of which involve Ann. Thank you for being here. And if you want to comment, the primary topics were centered around shared services and where we are in that project, what we're doing, the budget calendar for this coming year and how that's going to work were two of the main topics, and incorporating our 5-year plan and continuing to construct that and get that tied into that whole process. So, Ann, if you want to make any comments or add to that.
Just going into a little bit more detail on it, and the budget calendar and the packages will be going out within the next, if not the end of this week, tomorrow, or next week they'll be out. We talked about shared services on how to upgrade our software system that we currently have to make efficiencies for the business office and also for the different schools to help them out as well. And we went into the modeling process. It's a 5-year plan that we're looking to do from a budgeting perspective.
Can I add one more piece? The other piece that we looked at that will be coming to this board when next we meet are the budget assumptions.
Right.
So that's not a process that I've worked with this board since I've been here, kind of reviewing some guiding principles about budget development. So we reviewed some preliminary assumptions this morning with the Business Operations Committee. We'll do that when next we meet and look for approval on those assumptions at the end of October when we meet on the 26th. And those will kind of frame out some of our planning.
Great.
We'll meet again on the 12th to go through that. We briefly went through those today. And spent some time talking about the NASDAQ study, which will come to our meeting.
You did also have a conversation about town audit and Board of Ed audit.
We talked about that, the audit process that's beginning, and discussion around audit committee structure, and if that, but the audit is underway. I don't think there's from a timing perspective, there's not a lot that we can do immediately for this audit. We're going to get together and try and see what we can do in terms of understanding this process, being more engaged in the process that's beginning that we ever have had, that we've ever been before, which I think is important because, yeah, as a Board of Ed, we've never been engaged in either the audit or the scope or really the results even, to a great degree of how. So we are beginning that process to become certainly more engaged, more aware of, and have some input where you can for what we're doing, what's being done.
And they'll be coming in. They're coming in Monday to start for the 2 weeks.
Yeah, so they're starting already
between both buildings.
And then we had discussion about the possibility of structuring for the town, not just for us, but for the town also, an audit committee, and we talked about that some.
Who's giving the auditor their direction?
Well, the scope is what they came up with when they first came in, and they give the scope, and that goes in front of the Board of Finance. That went in the Board of Finance last week. Okay. On the scope of their audit.
Is that something that can be shared with the Board of Ed?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, we're met, Richard and I, both Richard and Peter Balzer, who's on the Board of Finance. Richard and I we have a meeting hopefully next week sometime where the auditors, with Richard and myself, can talk about that.
I think once it's appropriate, I'd like to see that presented to the Board of Ed so we understand what's happening. That'd be great.
Okay. So that's it for the Ops Committee. The Energy Commission, we met last night. Sadly, it was our anticipated, our expectation that we would have solar installed on the roofs of both Middle Driscoll and Middlebrook by the beginning of the school year. Clearly, that hasn't happened. We do not yet have an agreement with the Green Bank. The contract is still in question. There are a couple of clauses and conditions in the contract that we cannot get the town attorney and agreement to agree to. They're still hashing it out, and it's tied up. It's a very complicated thing that with state legislation that impacts the town and our inability to encumber future tax revenues. It's very complex. It's not happening. Hasn't happened. Okay. Although we do have equipment sitting at Middle Driscoll now.
Oh.
Okay. So we are staging and are ready to go the minute that is done. I doubt that the project will be completed before the end of this year. Yeah. You know, two things happen with that. Number one, it eats into our anticipated savings that we had projected at the outset of the project, which is, you know, a significant amount of money. But it's going to get done, and we are now looking at, or beginning to look at, Fairfield Ward High School solarized their parking lots. I don't know if anybody has seen and it looks great.
Yes, it does.
It looks great. They have, in a carport manner, long solar strips over their senior parking lot and the two extended parking lots there. It all happened over the summer. It wasn't there in the winter because when we went to basketball games there in the winter, it wasn't there. We drove Saturday, went to the football game Saturday. Whoa, where did this come from?
Cool.
And they look great. Significant project. So Chris is working with his counterpart in Fairfield to find out how, why, when, what, et cetera.
Right.
We had a proposal about a year ago or more to the Energy Commission to do a similar project, both here on our senior parking lot and the Clarking Air field that runs the entire length of the athletic fields. And it could be done. It would have a significant impact. So we're beginning to look at that as a possibility. The window for Z-Rex is open now, opens 1st of October through October, and this will probably be the last time there will be such a program offered by the state because of the state's fiscal constraints and conditions. So we are going to go ahead and submit for Z-Rex, assuming that we might do it. If you don't do it, there's a downside. We win Z-Rex, but there's no commitment, financial commitment, et cetera. And if it doesn't come to pass, we just pass. But we'd like to get it locked up so we have the possibility of doing it. So that would greatly enhance the production here at the high school level and for the benefit of the town. So.
Great. Anything from Chris on OPEB or?
Sorry?
Anything from Chris Stroup on his committees other than?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. So we're busy. We got a lot going on. The
Great.
12th, we have Ops Committee, we have Building Committee, we have Board of Ed meeting, all coming up on the 12th, all day.
Great. Thank you.
Morning, noon, and night, right?
Thank you. Chris?
The Policy and Communication Committee, we have the student use technology policy on tonight. It's very timely given our parents' comments. In addition, we're looking at a number of other policies, field trip for one, and still making sure we're in compliance with all state mandated policies. So you'll be seeing a steady flow coming in the coming months. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much. We now move on to review and discuss ready access update.
Fran and Eric.
So Glenn chewed up most of your time, so you have about 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry. You didn't tell me I had
It's just an
11.
image.
You know? Let me know the next time.
Just picking on you.
Yeah.
It's the last time I can do that.
Yeah, really.
No, we'll sit you next to him so that
No, then I can just rip it.
That's
You
right.
kick
Kick
me
him
under
under the table.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah.
Please.
What am I going
All right. Well, good evening, and thank you for having us. This is a quick update, kind of like a snapshot of where we've been for the past year. And the way I can actually just sum it up is we started off about a year ago with an if and when. We talked about, will we do this? When will we do this? We started then forming the why, which was really the most important part of it, the purpose of it, the student-centered learning environment. And then we went to the how and what, which is really the most recent of what we've been involved in. And Eric and I, in the last several months, with the help of a lot of different people, because this basically takes everyone in the community to help. We had the Library Learning Commons staff essentially working most of the summer, preparing. We had the IT staff. We had some wonderful student interns that we now dub them the IT innovators. And now within the last 4 weeks, we start seeing the results of where we have come since last year. And we call it our digital rollout. So for the past 4 weeks, what you may have seen from students at Middlebrook, all of the students, within about 5 or 6 days, were able to bring home Chromebooks that were assigned to them and are theirs, and they are now responsible for them. We've had great success at the high school where almost from the day one with our BYOD policy, students have been bringing in their devices and taking them out as teachers have found reasons, and this was the whole idea behind the Ready Access, to actually use them when they're really needed. At Cider Mill, the digital citizenship rollout, which is a curriculum we're really proud of, K-12, where we are really looking at privacy, permanence, responsible use, ethical use, et cetera, that is now K-12 being taught. And the Learning Commons is a very big part of it, so I was really happy to hear that there's, conversation about Miller Driscoll. Just to also address the PD privacy and kind of lump them together, our rollout of the whole digital learning has been with training of teachers, because it's really about the teaching and learning and making sure that they understand what resources are available to them and how to use them. The kickoff was really, here's what we're going to do and what the rollout looks like in the digital citizenship. Our next session is going to be on using assessment, which is actually data. So we're going to actually start the whole training with an entire part of the website that I've actually put together that has the process for the 16189 privacy law. Which addresses the privacy of student data. And in that we have until basically the end of this year to comply with the law that tells us that we really, if we're getting data, vendors have to agree to ensuring that the data is the district's, number one. It belongs to us and no one else. That in the cases of particular websites, we identify some websites that actually we're only looking at them, so we aren't really we're not providing data to them from our students. So we're looking at all of the possibilities, the websites that are just consumer-based, and those that actually provide the data, and that will be part of our training that we're going to be doing next. So that's in a very, we're really excited about the fact that devices are out, teachers can use them, training is there, and we can't do it without Eric's area and all of the systems piece that they're doing.
Can I just add a note? Do you mind if I add a note
Sure.
on the
I'm
student data privacy? Because
too.
it's a major concern. And so one of the challenges that Fran is confronting is, as Ms. Sue Kim noted, there are lots of websites, and for probably some time, teachers here and in districts all over the state, as they have found a digital resource, they've been unencumbered and have used it. And so one of the changes that Fran has been instituting is trying to regulate that use and setting up a proper vetting process so that we can address those concerns that you heard earlier and actually verify that, if teachers have an interest in a particular website that we hadn't yet vetted, that we can vet and ensure that, the data is secure.
So with that, I'm going to clarify. Visiting is one thing. Engaging at a level where the student is sharing information with that website is the other level, and it would be my assumption that that engagement may be happening at times when we're not aware of it, so we need to educate our staff to make sure that that engagement doesn't happen until it's been properly vetted.
That's correct.
Okay.
There is a process in place. And I can tell you that I've already gotten requests, because I have an app, it's called an app request form that teachers have to fill out. If it's not part of our digital tool set, as we call it, which is a consistent set of resources that are used throughout the K-12 continuum, they are to put in a request for it. And then I go through a vetting process that includes actually, working with the vendor. On the website, I have a decision criteria rubric, so you can take a look at how that decision is made. If we have no restrictions, how did that decision come to be made? If there's access but with restrictions, what are those restrictions? So there's also a public a site of resources that are actually being used that include the terms of service, the privacy policy, and when they were vetted, if they're pending currently, and if there are restrictions, what they are. And
So it might
comments.
make sense to just review the regulation, make sure that there's something in there to ensure that that's being followed.
Okay.
So,
Has that already been done, like, or is this a new? I
No,
mean,
it's
has that-
up on the website already now, so
I
it's
meant,
available.
so up to date for the last
Yeah,
few
well,
years,
as
have
the
apps
last
been
couple of days,
approved?
yes.
Okay, so teachers have always,
Well, this is new this year.
that's what I was asking.
Yes.
Okay.
so it's possible there's still some apps out there that haven't been fully vetted. I shouldn't say apps, websites.
It's possible, in terms of our history and trying to bring that to a head and making sure that every teacher understands it. It may take a little bit of time, but I think we'll get there.
Okay.
And you've been reviewing this with teachers as you've done.
Absolutely. I've gone
Of
to
course.
schools and met with teams and worked with the LLC staff, who also in turn is working with teachers. I get calls from teachers about websites almost on a daily basis.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on.
Great. Eric, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to add a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to thank the Board of Finance for approving our lease on Monday night, so we can continue with the purchasing of equipment in the district. So far this year, we've had a little over 1,000 tickets put into our ticket system and closed 850 of those. We've had some challenges in the buildings, but we put 2,000 additional devices on the network over the last 3 weeks. And so I appreciate all the buildings, their patience as we've worked through some of the challenges we've had. Some of the challenges we've had have actually been good challenges. The library here at the high school, for instance, we were set up for about 200 users, and we find that we're 250 to plus students there in the room. So we're going to backfill access, access for those areas that are coming to light. And then one of our real good successes we've had so far is with the help desks and the library learning commons for technology devices. So with handing out this many devices, some will break. Sometimes students need chargers. Sometimes students will leave a device at home. They're able to go into the learning commons, get a spare device, check out a device for the day, so the learning continues. And that's been a very successful rollout so far. So we've been very fortunate that we've been able to accomplish that as well.
Do you have any numbers on how many devices are being checked out per day?
I have seen it. So at Middlebrook, there's about 40, which is really not that many considering what the enrollment is. In the morning, they either forgot it or maybe it wasn't charged. Those are the two things that come in.
And we currently have 86 devices that are broken, that are out for repair right now.
I think we've learned that access to electricity at the high school has become an issue for charging, right?
But yes.
Yes, yes.
And they've broken 86 devices between the start of school and now?
There's 86 devices.
I shouldn't say anything. I already
Yes,
have a cell phone in my house.
There's
so.
86 devices, and those devices are spread out over sort of 4-year-old ages of devices. So some devices.
And just to be clear, we're not assuming that students have broken 86
Correct.
devices.
No,
Right.
these are.
I think that's completely plausible.
These are
We
things
have
like.
4,000 students.
I would say, a mouse pad stops working, a key is broken,
Yeah.
Okay,
stuck,
yeah.
a power is turning on and off,
Okay.
a battery's died. So that,
We have
those.
very responsible
Right.
students.
No, but these aren't brand new devices, right? They're not talking about the ones
No.
that people just.
No, we have a mix.
We have a mix, so we have a lot of older devices that are more prone to failure due to just age.
Great.
Good, thank you.
Another question.
Sure. Are you all done?
Oh, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Surge monitoring at the high school especially. When all of a sudden, when 1,000 students want to get on, what happens? Are we monitoring that, or are we, what is our peak capacity? I mean, how much does the system slow when all of a sudden 1,000 students at one time try to sign on and get into the system?
We actually have sort of a fixed amount of bandwidth.
Okay,
But if you look at our overall utilization, we're below our peak utilization.
we are.
So in some areas, if 1,000 students walk into the cafeteria and try and log on, we cannot support 1,000 students in the cafeteria or the library at one go.
So it's location sensitive?
It's location
Within the-
sensitive, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so if we're in small groups, we're in a much better position than if everyone in the school walks into one area and tries to log in. Because we haven't scaled for 1,000 people in an auditorium first.
Can you also just comment on the speed of connectivity of the various networks? So my understanding when we spoke last about this was the student device network was more robust. The guest network was less robust to try to manage flow. Hey, can you just kind of update the board?
I understand there's like 5 different ways a student can sign in or get on the system.
There are actually 4 different wireless networks that the students can access and a wired network. One of the things that we met with the high school about this, and this is something that we're going to be working on over the next month, is that we have a student network for the high school, and we're going to be working with the high school students to move them to the student network for all of their work. The guest network actually operates at a slower speed across the district.
That's the one the Board of Ed uses, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then there's a network for district-owned devices, and then there's a network for other district-owned desktops. So we try and split some of that traffic due to where people need to go and what they need to do on the networks. So we'll be in the process over the next 2 months or so on redistributing some of that traffic because we have some people that are on different segments of the network where we really want to guide them to other locations.
And if we guide the students to the student network, we will have the capacity to handle that without,
Yes, we do have that capacity. Not in all areas, and that's something that, as we've come up to speed with all these additional devices, we are finding some areas that we need additional access points to support the number of users in those areas.
And we're working on addressing those.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. As we identify them, we're working on addressing them.
Some other questions? I have one recommendation and an observation on a teachable moment. The recommendation would be, as you know where the load locations are, publish that information. Get it out to teachers. Get it out to students, let them know where the hot spots are, let them know where the cold spots are, let them work within that, let their personal behaviors help you manage and load balance, because they'll do that. And then the second one is really a teachable moment, in that I was talking with some students about the Bring Your Own Device program and how it was working at the high school. And some of the kids said that they just absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. And then another group of kids said they found it distracting as the kids are starting to figure out how to text one another during school hours. I don't think regulating the limitation of that is realistic in any way, shape, or form. So I think there's a teachable moment opportunity to reinforce with kids how to prioritize when they focus in a classroom and when they focus on other communications. So think about that. I'd hate to see us simply come down with a policy or regulation that isn't realistic in the real world.
Right.
So,
Agreed.
good.
It should be empowering. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move on to review and discuss the scorecard update and the testing report.
Sorry, Matt.
You want us to surround you? I do want to say, as we're getting set up, just as a positive, we've all had digital citizenship boot camps with our kids to really focus on the safety and the security. And it's gone amazingly well in my building, and I know in your building, because my son came home and taught me all about fishing and what that meant and the safety concerns around it. So a huge kudos to the LLC team and Fan and Eric for putting together some great curriculum for our students. And we worry about safety, but I can't tell you how successful the start of the school year has been, so thank you guys.
And we're looking forward to routing our 1,341 students to the new network. We'll do that together.
All in one place.
All in the cafeteria at one time.
Yes.
They seem to like the jungle, they found out, so, yeah.
It's a hard spot, I guess.
Listen,
Hot spot?
It's a hot spot.
Need a new
they
it
figure
has
it out pretty
chargers.
quickly.
No surprise.
Please.
Okay, so,
last year at this time, we reviewed the standardized testing results for 2016. And if you recall, we used those results to set targets for improvement on our new district scorecard. And if you recall, that scorecard is structured around metrics at the end of each grade day. So grades 2, grade 5, and grade 8, and some metrics at the end of the high school. And we did that because we felt it was a good way for us to gauge how well each of our schools is preparing our students to make the transition to the next level. We all know that transitions are very difficult, but they can be a lot easier if you're at grade level. And so that would help us to make some decisions around allocating resources, professional development, budgeting, and strategic improvement. So I have my principal friends here with me tonight, and they're going to provide you with an update on how we're progressing on those scorecard targets. And then I will review the results of all of the standardized testing and give you some information about comparisons to some of our reference groups where we have that information already. Now, I do think it's important that we keep in mind what these types of tests tell us. They are very broad accountability measures. They're really designed to help people like us at a fairly high level, at the district level, the board level, the state level, to answer the question, are enough of our students meeting standards? They're not really designed to help us answer questions around the relative strengths and weaknesses of particular curriculum areas or instructional frameworks. We have to look at other data to answer those questions, things like our interim benchmark assessments and our classroom-based assessments. So that said, I think what you're going to see tonight is that the vast majority of our students in Wilton continue to meet or exceed grade level standards, and that their performance exceeds that of most of the students in Connecticut and across the nation. However, when you do compare our students' performance to performance of students in like districts, our Berkeley counterparts, I would say that not enough of our students are meeting standards. And so in looking at some of that data I mentioned, our benchmark assessments, our classroom assessments, what we are seeing is that we have very inconsistent growth, academic growth for our students, across students, across classrooms, across schools. And that's mainly because each of our students, each of our teachers, our schools, are in different places on that journey towards meeting grade level standards. And that's because of the particular challenges and opportunities each student, each teacher, and each school are facing. I can give you a for instance. Students who receive intervention service, in general, on average, are showing greater academic growth than students who don't receive intervention services. And I think that's a very positive finding given our recent emphasis on the whole intervention process, the SRPI process. But even within that group, there are some students who are not showing progress, and they're moved on to, for instance, a referral to special education. The students who are showing that greater than average growth, you have to remember, started well below grade level. So even though they are showing greater academic growth than kids who are not in intervention, they're still not at grade level. We're closing the gap, but it's not quite closed yet. Likewise, we are seeing some of our teachers, a relatively few number of teachers, who are promoting amazing academic growth for the vast majority of their students. We also have a relatively small group of teachers who are struggling to show any academic growth for their students. But for the vast majority of our teachers, when we look at their classes, they are producing amazing academic growth for some of their students and not for other students. And so I think the challenge for us is to support our teachers in figuring out how we can promote consistent academic, high academic growth for all of our students. And we do have some thoughts about how to do that. We're not going to share that with you tonight. What we're going to do at the next meeting is to update our targets once again, and then share with you our action plans and our thoughts about how we can support our teachers. Make sense? Good. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Kathy.
Well, thank you, friend Chuck.
You're welcome.
You're a principal friend, not a secondary friend.
Yes, exactly. Principal friend today, right? Well, first I just want to say thank you. I'm going to speak on behalf of all of my colleagues, but thank you for listening to our stories, because it would be really easy to just pop a whole bunch of scores up there and not hear sort of the story behind the scores. So I'm going to start off with a celebration, and that celebration for me is my teacher climate score. And I have to say I was really ecstatic about that, given the fact that the teachers moved, and then they packed up and they moved again, and then some of them packed up and moved again. So given the fact that even though we didn't meet our target, that score continued to increase, and it was an improvement over the year before. And again, we're sort of making, you know, steady progress in the right direction. Like I said, we didn't hit the 81, but we did go from 71 to 76 to 78. And so kudos to the staff, because there's kind of a lot going on. Again, with the parents, I just had these really high hopes, and we didn't meet our target, but we stayed in a score that was pretty much the same as the year before. So part of that is a lot of the work that Bernadette Hess did, and again, I think a lot of my communication last year was around construction, and that really wasn't questioned on the culture and climate survey, so we'll make that a little more substantive, the communication this year. So those are sort of my thoughts on there. I have to tell you the story of the second grade map test, so I'll keep it short, but there are two versions of a test that second graders can take. And so one version, Map for the primary grades, is a version of the test where the kids put on their headphones and the test is read to them. So it's testing their listening, and when it tests their math, it's really testing their math because they're listening to that. And the target scores from last year into, you know, this year were based on the students taking that same test all year long. So because we weren't changing enough things, we thought, okay, so we looked at baseline last year when the kids took the test in the fall, and 75% of the kids in math and 73% of the kids in reading were above the 60th percentile on that test where they listened to it. And there are some different cutoff scores based on NWEA, and so, you know, with some agreement from the second grade teachers, we thought, let's try it. Let's try the test, the harder test that the kids are actually going to have to read on their own. And so they took that test in the winter, and again, as we could have all predicted, their scores went down because it's a very different kind of a test. But by the end of the year, their scores were right back up there. And so I do want to celebrate the fact that, and Chuck talked a little bit about growth scores, but that in the area of reading, we had 55% of our kids achieve high growth, and in the area of math, we had 65% of the kids achieve high growth. So again, our targets, you know, is sort of apples to oranges. We learned a lot by giving the test, and then come to find out this year, NWE changed it, and all the kids just take the K-2 test, which is that listening test. So we'll see how they do, you know, based on a couple of years ago. But that's sort of the story behind our scores for this year. So, any questions?
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment that, just keep in mind that Kathy has only been there for a year, and so, I mean, looking at the climate scores, you should take some credit for that. I mean, that's really great, because not only were they going through construction, but the teachers and the students and the parents were also going through having a new principal, and that takes adjustment. So, you know, I think the 71% from the, you know, parents is great.
Thanks. And the kids were way up there.
Yeah, no,
I'm not sure
I
how
don't
the
doubt
kids didn't make my slide, but the kids were, you know, right up there where they were.
Well,
so
they're happy.
79.
Yes, right.
So, which, if the kids and the teachers are happy. So.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand this. So you're saying that there were two ways the tests were administered. One, when the
two different
versions of the test, right? One when the
questions are read to the students and the students score higher. The harder one is when the students have to read and comprehend the questions, and that's what these results reflect.
Yes.
The kids were given the harder.
Right, so sort of the kids were here when they took the one that they were listening to.
Okay.
And again, then when they took the new test, which you know, like I said, is much harder because you're reading the whole entire thing, their scores dropped. But then by the end of the year, when they took the new test again, they were right back up where they were at the beginning of the year. Does that make sense?
So these
based
don't
on
really
the
matter.
different tests. So those two,
You're not comparing.
They're not comparable.
Do we know districts where other second grade districts took the harder test, how kids compared?
Well, again, based on the scores we got on the test, let me see, I can tell you that winter to spring in reading, we went from 59% of the kids being above the 60th percentile to 73% being above the 60th percentile. And in math, we actually went from 48% being above the 60th percentile to 71 being above the 60th percentile. So that's where we take into consideration those growth scores. So, which really, I think, hold more meaning for us, I think, at my level.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good.
Okay, so we had lots to celebrate at Cider Mill, and you know, I think a lot of it has to do with the intense work that we've been doing over the last, this is my 5th year in the area of implementation of reading and writing workshop and the new math curriculum. You know, I feel very lucky that we're kind of, I think now starting to see the fruits of all of the work we've been doing over the last few years. I would like to say that our work with our IETs and our work with coaching need to be celebrated, because I know that that has had a positive impact on these results. By far, it is the most valuable and effective staff development that I could hope for, and I think these results really celebrate the effectiveness that it's been having in the school, and I'm, you know, really pleased and celebrating that fact. If you look at science, I think that's a testament to the strong science program we've had. You know, we have Kevin Meehan, who's you know, a dedicated science teacher in our building in the past. He's now this year going to be working with Miller Driscoll, so they will reap the benefits of having his instructional expertise and leadership. So we're really excited to have that brought in K-5. So that's a huge celebration looking at our growth scores there. One of the things I would like to celebrate is the work that we did with our teachers. That was a huge focus for us at Cider Mill last year, and it continues to be. I don't know if anybody saw the Team Cider Mill shirts going around, but we you know, really have worked hard to come together as a staff. We are large communities in our buildings, and you know, I would say that culture and climate in a large building is probably one of the harder things I've come up against. And so just, you know, communication with families and, you know, keeping everybody on a positive, upbeat journey, that's probably one of the hardest things as a building principal. And, you know, I'm really proud of the work that all of our staff did. We've done incredible work with Bill Preble, our adult leadership team, our student helping hands, and all the projects that they've been working on. We've really made a lot of growth. Our one area we did not meet, which I definitely was a little bit surprised, but we did a lot of reflecting on this, is our work with students. And we really dug into the data, and there is a huge discrepancy in many cases, somewhere between 9, depending on the different subsets of data that you're looking at, 9 and 21 percentage point difference between what teachers perceive and what our students are perceiving, which I find fascinating. So that means that we feel like we're giving maybe a lot of voice and, you know, a lot of positive rewards and opportunities for our students, but as teachers, as adults, but that our students don't feel that. So either number one, we're not being explicit enough in some of our efforts and work, or we have a lot more work to do in that area. And so we've already shared all of this data with both our adult design team and our student leadership team, our helping hands, and gone through a dot voting process to set goals and come up with an action plan. And so we're ready to set new targets and really make an improvement on that, because obviously our kids are our #1 clients, and so we really want to move that number forward. Any questions?
And do the parents, like, are they asked similar questions? So
yes, and so the parents, we did meet our target. I would say that the growth area that we still continue to have is, as the PTA I think I've brought it up here, is that more proactive communication, and so that's kind of a goal that we have.
Okay, but the parents were asked, like, are the kids getting positive feedback? So
yes, and again, the results weren't as disparate.
Okay.
What was striking was the difference between the kids and our staff. So it was fascinating.
Yeah. are somehow getting the idea.
Somehow, that's what I mean. The
Yeah.
adults all seem to maybe be on a
Yeah.
better page, but we're not, you know.
No, that's.
So.
Thank you.
So Middlebrook is looking at a period of time where we're in a building year. You know, I think that when we look at our academic results, we're always looking at just our 8th graders. Middlebrook has been rolling through some academic changes that are rolling out at different speeds at different grade levels, right? So these results are on students who, for example, who were not taking part in our reading writing workshop full implementation. So our high points in terms of our targets being met are in the area of math. We met our target in terms of students, the percentage of 8th grade students who are scoring advanced on the Smarter Balanced math. We exceeded our target in terms of students completing algebra, and we met our target in terms of students completing geometry. So those are 3 areas where we did manage to stay on track with our goals. In terms of the Smarter Balanced ELA, we did not meet in terms of students at or above goal or students advanced, and also did not meet the goal on percent of 8th graders at or above goal on math Smarter Balanced, but we did meet our goal on students who are advanced. Our percentage of 8th graders at or above goal on the science CMT, we did not meet. We were within a few points. Again, Science CMT is a test that we have been moving away from in terms of we're getting ready for the NGSS, and there is we're knowingly de-emphasizing some things that were more heavily tested in the CMT. And on my second page, we also did not meet our climate scores. We have been, as the team at Cider Mill, working on really reflecting on the climate work that we're doing. We've restructured to shelter time in our in the school schedule for the adult and student leadership teams to work. We had a student group in over the summer kindness crew, sort of already solidifying and doing some work. We've started a club, the Kindness Club, to be the working arm of our climate committee. So we have we're working on several fronts. We also are seeing several of the projects the kids worked through last spring that have sort of come to fruition and we now have in place for the beginning of this school year. One example that leaps to mind is that one of the areas that our students identified last year from our school climate data was consistent expectations around behavior, consistent enforcement of behavior was something that was a challenge for us, and that became a communication challenge between teachers and students. So we had the entire staff and more than 100 students involved in re-articulating, not to become more strict, but to become more consistent. And I have to say, the children have done just a wonderful job with that. The moving through the hallways and the common spaces at big transition times feels so much calmer and more comfortable, and therefore we have a lot of opportunities to praise kids for staying within their expectations. So I look at my scorecard and I think it paints a picture of what we need to be working on. I think we're taking really proactive steps. We are continuing to roll out, so a lot of the work that we've done in the last couple of years at Middlebrook isn't actually reflected necessarily in the 8th grade scores, in the sense that we started the rollout of workshop at 6th and then at 7th, and it's just now the 8th grade is in their first year of implementation this year. And as we know, we still have a lot of moving parts in our math program. We're going, full bore on we're trying to leave no stone unturned in terms of how we can bolster the acquisition of skills for our kids in their math work. So we've got some really interesting and sort of innovative approaches going on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about our new plan. So questions?
Yeah, I guess the conclusion that I'm drawing in listening to you is that we have over the last couple of years really focused at Middlebrook on math and have invested significantly in coaching and math, whatever, that's been a commitment to do that. Are we seeing that effort reflected? Are these scores a reflection of that effort?
Well,
would you
we are
say, or
seeing-
can we draw that conclusion
Right.
that we're getting a return on our investment?
Right.
Maybe.
I think when I go through my slides, I can better answer that
Okay.
question.
Because I mean, I would come to that conclusion as soon, because I know we've made commitments in the growth for our math and invested in it. It would appear that it seems to be working. So, next step would be, where else do we need to make that investment? Okay, and what else do we need to focus on? Not let up here, keep going, but are there other areas that we need to invest in, focus on?
And as Lauren mentioned, next week when we do our action plans, she will share with you some of the
Yeah.
really interesting things that she's been.
We're working on that deep work of working smarter. You know, the students and staff of Middlebrook really couldn't work harder than they work, and their intention and effort level, their persistence is really wonderful. And so what we want to do is really let our student performance data point us to targeted, efficient instruction that really meets the needs of the groups of children as they present. And we're really working on, I think that is the main focus of our staff development this year, is identifying exactly where the instruction is most needed for children. So being really efficient.
To try to
with
keep
the
this conversation moving on,
Sorry.
when do you plan to present to us as a team your specific efforts to address those areas that you did not meet your needs?
At our next meeting.
At the next meeting, perfect. Bob?
So we met our goal for evidence-based reading and writing. In fact, we set the goal at 95%. We are proud of the fact that we were the highest score in the DIRG, so it's quite an accomplishment. Probably in the state, I attribute that to our feeder schools and our strong curriculum, our parents and our students, and our great faculty. SAT math clearly remains a growth area. You know, we said last year we want to push that into the 80% range. That will remain a goal. We moved the needle a little bit from 76 to 77, but that's an area we continue to focus on. With the Bon-Har work, the anchor tasks, the further alignment of the curriculum, that will remain a target, and we're not going to lower it. We're going to set our sights on 80, and we will get there over time. The ACT, very strong performance and consistent performance. It may be of noteworthy to the board that 244 students took the ACT last year. So that spike that we anticipated, we saw it because in 2016, 179 students took it. So with the increased students taking it, the composite was 26.9. That's what I always look at first of all. You'll recall that last year it was 27, which was a 5-year high water mark. So we were right there, rounded up at 27, which is very strong. We met or partially met all our goals for mean scores in math, English, reading, and science. So that was an accomplishment. We did fall slightly below these percentage targets in math and science, and consequently a little bit lower than our target for all the students meeting benchmark on all 4 of the areas. But when Dr. Smith shows you the slide later on with the data over time, you'll just see it's remarkably consistent and strong performance on the ACT. Transitioning to the AP.
Do we expect that ACT test taking to continue to grow? Are we anticipating that?
I would anticipate it to remain strong. I think that when the SAT and the kinetic SAT grow further demystified, there was that period where people were a little bit apprehensive about the SAT. But we know that our students, they've gravitated toward the ACT. We know that they're applying to schools across the nation. It's no longer a Midwestern regional test, you know. So I think right now it's really very much on the students and the families' radar screens, and we'll track that over time. It's a good question. So in AP, I always say, I think I'm repetitive, but our objective is always to increase performance and increase participation at the same time, and that's really the charge. We want to be highly inclusive with our students. So when you look at this slide, you'll note that we met our targets for the number of AP students overall, AP course enrollment, and also the number of AP exams taken. So those targets were high, and we did well there. We met the goal with the number of students scoring 3 or higher was 699, which we felt was important. And I felt that we could set the bar at 91% for those students who met the target for hitting 3 or higher on all of those. I thought it was attainable. That's our high water mark. We fell a little bit short at 88, but I think our students still performed quite well. We'll look at that each year. Sometimes I consider looking at our data over time, when you're in the high 80s, you're doing well. And we're not going to make excuses about increased participation. I still think that our kids can get into the 90 range, and we'll keep pushing on that. We had 160 advanced placement scholars, which for those students, I want to celebrate them. That's an accomplishment. These are students who scored 3 or higher on 3 or more tests. So, 160, we had the target set at 158. Kudos to our students and our AP teachers who really, follow the audit, and these are college level courses. And again, the way the students perform, the way the families support them, I think it's incredible. So we are proud of that. We're proud of the students is what we're proud of. On the next slide, there's a story behind the CAP science. You may recall that last year we had the highest CAP performance in the state. And so we anticipated similar performance this year, and when we got the results, I was trying to wrap my mind around in my team, how do you go from 82 to 61 or 55 to 34? There's a story behind that. This is a new online test, and we did some research in the DERG and in surrounding communities, and seemingly there's a precipitous drop or decline in performance. So we need to unpack that a little bit more, but the bottom line is we didn't really have a chance to get to 82 on this new test. When we hear, and I won't mention the district names, but the DERG schools seem to be right around this 60 mark. So we're right in the middle of that where we should be. Our goal was to really hit it hard, and it looks a little bit deceiving with that data because it's comparable to the performance of our other schools. With the school climate data, here's the bottom line. And when you look at that, we did not meet our targets. I mean, in spite of initiatives around personalized learning, project change, a new flight program, an improved and revised advisory program, and our myriad other school climate programs and initiatives, our performance around school climate has been, pretty consistent. I find myself wondering, as we've talked about as colleagues, what does it take to get to 80% on this instrument? I think that's something we need to have further conversations about. I remain very proud of the climate at Wilton High School. I think, like Dr. Mitchell said, there's some disparate data on teacher perceptions of some of these metrics and student perceptions and sometimes families. So, I think that's worth considering further. And, I think there are a lot of it, when we look at it, we met again today with Kim Zemo, our Safe School Climate Coordinator, a lot of very encouraging data points and good qualitative data, but also some growth areas. And, we will continue to focus on school climate, empower students. It hasn't gone unnoticed that the board, the great work we're doing around Link Crew, which I think has been really a home run so far for the upperclassmen and the underclassmen. I heard today from some very reliable sources, students don't feel uncomfortable walking through the jungle because of the relationships between the upperclassmen and the underclassmen. So I'll leave you with that thought. I think this program is going to be powerful, and we pride ourselves on the climate at Wilton High School, and we'll continue to work on it and empower our students and families to give us feedback about how we can even, get a little better. So that's always the charge. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I just, can we stop? I'm sorry. Karen, they find these things really hard.
The climate.
Areas, in addition to some of the other, you explain the science things, but the climate of school goes so far to kids learning. If climate isn't good, the shortfalls there, then it impacts everything. It impacts their approach to their day, how they feel about themselves. I mean, there's so much, and as a board, I don't understand. I don't know the detail when you say the climate score. I don't know what you're asking. I don't know what you're looking for. I'd like to be more aware of what are you surveying? What kind of questions are you asking? What are your expectations? Because I don't know. I'm just looking at a raw score here that says to me, wow, look at that, students 55%. No, wait a minute. But I don't know how you're surveying them.
Have you ever taken it as a parent?
I've never taken it. I never got requested as a parent to do a survey.
Oh, it's sent out to all the parents.
I will tell you for a fact.
Yeah.
If it's helpful, at our second October meeting, when we do the district level plans, we'll have a climate plan. I can ask Kim we'll send you some information so you can see the actual questions, but I can have her take us through that.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that. I mean, I don't know what we're surveying. I don't know what kind of
I
questions
actually
we're
spoke to Kim today.
Okay.
This data is a compilation of a lot of data.
Mhm.
And so I think it would be helpful for the board to really dig down deeply into what the questions were. Because like my colleagues have said, when you look more deeply into the data, there are some positive and some negative areas.
Okay.
So we'd like to help you to understand.
Yeah, well, I
I'd
mean,
love to
the
give an
board's role, I
example.
mean, our function here is to help you understand and how can we help you? What do you need from us? How can we help you address these issues? And I don't know that we can help if we don't understand how you're getting to this data or what it is you're looking
I
at.
would also like to suggest that maybe we have Bill Preble, who's the big expert in how to analyze this data and to make some suggestions.
I'm open. I mean, our role, we've got to figure out how we can help you improve here.
I'd love to just share one side note on that. When you look at my school climate score for teachers, for students was 62. And we decided, we worked really hard on helping to ensure that every kid felt connected to a specific teacher. And so we went out on a limb, and it was sort of an emotional risk from the staff's point of view. We did a survey and asked every kid at Middlebrook, do you have an adult that you can go to when you have a problem or a concern? If you, an adult at Middlebrook that you feel connected to. And we actually had them identify one or more people. And, we came up with 81 or 82% of our kids at every grade level who could name the person, one or more staff members that they would go to if they had a problem. And interestingly, we did dig down then into those kids who said no, and it was remarkable the number of good no's that we found, right? That I really like my teachers, but I prefer to talk about my problems with my parents. We asked the question, if you don't feel connected, who might you like to be connected with? A remarkably high number of students were identifying their favorite teacher on their team. So they like their teacher, they have a relationship with their teacher, they interpreted that question and said no. The few students who were true no's, I will tell you, to a student, we had them on someone's dashboard, that we had
they're on the radar.
A member of the staff, maybe our mental health staff, maybe a special educator. And so because we're all about climate, right?
Yeah.
Children can't learn until they feel safe and
Exactly.
protected and supported, and that they trust their adults. And so I have a lot of respect for Bill Preble in his work, but I think that it's interesting also to take a look at it through another snapshot. We asked our children to be honest. They knew that their names were being recorded. We were very overt about it all year long. We want to know you. We want you to know us. And so it's kind of crushing when you get the 62 as the result. But I think we sort of have to maybe ask a question, just like we say with the map data. It's one point of information. We put it in an array of data, and we say, what's the takeaway? I think that maybe we need to enhance our data array with some measures that don't come in a 66 question survey at the end of the year.
Well, how can we help you? I mean, that really is, student climate score at the high school of 55. I don't know how you got there. I don't know what the negatives were versus the positives. We've made investments in the flight. We targeted, focused.
Good point, but I was just going to say,
One quick
sure.
about flight is, like, if you remember when Deb and Pam were here last spring, the freshmen who felt more connected by the end of their, that was a substantial change.
Yeah.
And so flight is an investment we made that we saw already have seen.
Yeah.
So,
and more
that's
evidence
just to make you feel a little bit better.
No, I know. I mean, the flight program is something that we focused on. We understood clearly there was a need to improve the transition from Middlebrook to the high school. It is a tough transition. I mean, you're going from, you've got age change, you've got a whole lot of things physiologically going on with kids, at that time.
Glenn, if we can, I'd like to give them an opportunity to come back to us with their game plans at the next meeting.
Okay, good. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now move on to review and discuss the tri-state visit.
Oh, you've got one more piece here. I will try to do this. You want to let Dr. Smith off the hook here?
Oh, okay. No, you can't do yours.
The dirt comparison.
You are kidding, right?
Yeah.
5 minutes, Chuck.
I will be quick. So just to remind you, can I go back?
All right, so what we're going to review tonight is the Smarter Balanced Assessment, the Connecticut SAT. We're going to look at the ACT, the AP, and I have some information on college entrance. To start with the SBA, I just wanted to remind you that students are assigned 4 levels, 1 through 4. The percentages that you're going to see on the subsequent slides are the percentages of students who meet either a 3 or 4. They either meet or exceed grade level standards. So here are the results of the SBA in ELA, English Language Arts, in grades 3 through 8 with a DER comparison. Wilton is over on the right in bold. You'll notice that there is some relative strengths in grades 7 and 5. And you'll notice that we are about on par with Weston and Reading. The interesting thing about language arts, this is the year-to-year change. There was quite a precipitous drop in ELA performance across the state and across the DERG. You're also going to see that New Canaan is posting some very unusual gains. I don't know where that's coming from, but they're an outlier. For most of the DERG and pretty much across the state, there was a pretty precipitous drop. I do not believe that our students have become less proficient readers. I really believe that this is an artifact of the test because it is consistent across the state. They've either increased the test item difficulty, or I think more likely they are code switching. They are using different language, and with young kids, you switch the language, you're going to get different results. So, in terms of math, on the SBAC, again, Wilton is over on the left in bold. What's notable about math is that performance in math continues to lag behind ELA across the state and across the DERG, and unfortunately, Wilton tends to lag behind the DERG. Our performance, again, is most closely on par with Weston. The interesting thing about math is that we posted greater growth than most of our DERG counterparts. Again, taking the outlier, New Canaan, out of the mix.
Have you reached out to New Canaan to try to figure out what they're doing?
I am very good friends with the people in New Canaan, and yes. Okay. Well,
I'm not speaking for New Canaan. I'm going to speak for Wilton. We made a commitment when I arrived here that we would not game this or any other state standardized test. So I will tell you from my own personal experience where I live, that district does, in my opinion, an inordinate amount of test prep geared toward inflating those scores. That is not something that we are going to do. I think we have a belief about if we deliver a viable curriculum and have really good instruction, the scores will come.
Okay.
And next week we can share with
those lines.
We can share with you some things that we think will make a big difference. But we're moving in the right direction. We are closing the gap. It's slower than I would like, but I think we're doing the right things.
Chuck, are you going to show us how these scores compare to last year?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Are you sure?
I don't have it on this slide.
Okay, I mean, these
I believe
are showing us where we are
right
in
now.
relation. You're telling us like not to worry about how we're
right.
behind our peers, but how are we doing in moving
Okay, the
forward?
previous slide, for some reason I can't move back, but the previous slide was a year-to-year comparison, and we did show growth, 2-point-something% growth in math.
You just don't have the, you don't have the.
You don't have the grade-by-grade comparison.
Right.
However, if you remember, I believe we sent you a communication when the results first came out, where I had each grade level in 16 and in 17. I didn't happen to have it up here.
Yeah, we can send that again.
Yeah, we can send it again. But this gets at the same thing, this slide. All right, so we only have one subgroup in Wilton that's large enough for us to produce results that are reliable, and that's for students with disabilities. So this is a chart that disaggregates those results, students with disabilities and students without. The center column is students without disabilities, and you'll notice those percentages are closer to what we would expect of students in Wilton. The interesting thing about students with disabilities is that this year we saw a rather precipitous drop in performance. Now, I don't have 2015 up there, but you may recall that performance was quite low in 2015. Then in 2016, we saw a really significant improvement in students with disabilities. This year, we seem to have made, at least in English language arts, quite a regression. So I'm sure Andrea and Sharon and her staff are going to be digging into that to get to what did we do in 2016 that posted those kind of results.
Do you have any idea?
No, I don't. And I think Andrea at this point is still learning about our district. And
yes, I'm on my listening tour, but you know, these are concerning numbers. Students with disabilities, you know, we know that we need to address reading for students with disabilities. We know that we need to address it intensively. We know that we need to focus in on not only decoding and encoding, but on developing vocabulary and comprehension and confidence in our young students with disabilities as readers. I think those grade 3 scores, actually all the scores, but that grade 3 set of scores tells me that we're identifying students too late. We need to identify them much earlier when the gap is the least wide and keep them up rather than trying to fill a hole once it's been created. And so I think that's some of the work we're doing, is trying to work with our staff on catching the struggling reader much earlier, looking at much earlier data and intervening. Whether we identify them with a disability yet or not is irrelevant to me. Okay. What's relevant is catching it early and intervening with strong, very well-trained staff who know how to intervene and progress monitor more regularly, and then make adjustments as needed. So that's really the key. As we begin to unpack this data with teams and look at sharpening our tools, it's going to take some time to realize massive change in this. I'd rather see sustainable change than, oh, we celebrate this year and oh, we're sad next year and oh, we celebrate again. I'd rather see much more sustainable change. So that's what I'm looking to do, and I'll be filling you in as we move forward. Okay, thanks.
so we see something similar in math for students with and without disabilities. The difference is we see more growth in math. You'll notice in 7th and 4th grade, we're posting some pretty significant gains and less regression in other grades. So that's a positive impact. You've seen some of these results. We're very pleased to say that we are tied for first in SAT, in ELA at the high school. And unfortunately, we are not first in math.
Not tied for first. Yet.
But we are very close to Ridgefield, Westport, and we have exceeded Region 9. So. Now, I wanted to talk to you for a minute about science, because I know that
I apologize.
Sure.
Can you back up?
I can try. Matthew, how do I make it go back?
Just roll on the wall.
Oops. There we go.
So back to the previous question about the test scores and our dear friends to the southwest, and how they did so much better at those lower grade
Lower
levels.
grades, not so much here.
I want to point out to the parents of our community that when you look at how our kids are turning out as they depart our wonderful education system, they seem to be doing pretty well, although we have more work to do in math.
Yes, we do. It's much more difficult to game this test than the other tests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, I wanted to talk a little bit about science. So we have some good scores at the lower grades, and high school, maybe not so much. But it's very, very important to understand that this test tests old standards, and we have made the transition to the new standards. I was not expecting performance to be very good on these tests. This is basically what they're calling a legacy test. It's basically a dead test. It's not going to be administered anymore. We've been doing a lot of work to get ready for the new test that will be administered at the end of this year. That test is going to be a field test. I don't know if you remember when we did field tests for the Smarter Balanced. The results we get back are not student-specific. And because they're tweaking the reliability and validity of the test items, the test results aren't helpful. So we're probably not going to get reliable and valid test scores for 2 years, at which point we will then be able to set targets for improvement.
Chuck, can you just clarify so that the Captain CMT Science will not be administered, or is
That
it in
is what-
addition to the field test for NGSS?
My understanding was that this would not be administered. They want to administer the field test.
Okay.
I do believe that that requires a waiver from the federal government, but they seem fairly confident that they will get that.
Okay.
There has been some talk, if we don't get the waiver, that they might administer both tests.
Yeah, we
that will-
played in that sandbox already
Yeah.
some years ago, which is not time well spent.
Fortunately, I won't be chairman when those complaints come in.
So these are the 5-year trends.
That'd be my legacy.
Maybe
There
we'll
you
just
go.
re-elect you tonight, Bruce.
Refuse to accept.
Force you to stay.
Okay, next.
All right, ACT. These are the 5-year trends. Again, Bob really talked about this already. You'll notice that over the past 5 years, this past year was the highest number of students taking the SAT, and there has been virtually no change in the performance of students. It's still quite good, well exceeding benchmarks. And this is just a comparison of us to the state in all of those areas. This is AP. We had 361 students take 806 tests. 699 of them got a 3+, which is 87%. Excellent performance. And this is a graphic display over time. So we're right within where we need to be. And again, very nice number of AP Scholars students who scored 3 or better on 3 or more of the tests. So, very nice. All right, so this one. This is the graph that was of most concern to me. You will notice that we have not seen results like this since 2008. And so Bob and I spent a lot of time looking into this to try to figure out what's happening. It's difficult to determine. I can share with you that there has been some shifting of categories. So the most competitive category shrunk. Some moved lower, some moved higher. We did notice that there were a larger number of children applying to state schools that do not fit into those categories. I mean, UConn does, but most don't. A slight increase in the number of students who are applying to Canada and Europe. We have some anecdotal information that these two categories are becoming increasingly difficult to gain acceptance, that they might be shrinking their freshman classes. You know, we don't have definitive answers about why we get these results. My feeling is that, as you can see in the graph, every once in a while there will be a cohort where the results aren't what we want them to be. But we always need to remember one data point does not make a trend. Bob and I looked at the upcoming class and their grade point distribution, and it looks very promising. It's actually skewed very high. Their SAT scores look very good as well. So my hope is that next year when I come back, that bar will have gone back up. I don't want to panic because of one data point. So.
Do you think it would be impossible to gather, but could this be the result of some financial considerations on the part of families?
It could be.
And I think that would be,
State
yeah,
colleges,
I think that would
right.
be, is certainly a driver
Yes.
into today's current economic conditions. I think it's certainly something, and I don't know how we would gather that or identify that, but there's no academic reason
Right.
for the change.
No.
So you have to look beyond the academics, and I think it's probably, a lot of it is driven
Yes.
financially.
Actually, we did compare like 2016 cohort to the 2017 cohort. The grade distribution and the scores were very similar.
They were.
So there was no
Look back to
change.
2008.
Right, should go back and look, yes.
Okay, because I do think that is playing a role, a factor.
Yeah. Well, 2008, we were in an
That was
aggregate.
it. 1 year before. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's that?
It was before. I mean, it was that class of 2009 was the one that was affected by the economic.
I see.
Because that was the fall, you know, the 2008. Sorry to burst that bubble, but
No,
class of
probably right.
2008 was already in college when it happened.
Leave it to the historian.
Well, my son was in the class of 2009. I remember it very well.
Yeah, so we're going to watch it.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we move on to review and discuss the tri-state visit.
Right, this is just a really notification to the board. As you know, Wilton has been a member of the Tri-State Consortium for many, many years. Gary Richards, when he was here, served on the steering committee for that group. I currently serve on the steering committee for that group, so we've had a very close relationship for a long time and done good work and really benefited from that relationship. As part of the Tri-State Consortium requirement, they require triennially that districts participate in visits, and we've had visits here, I'm sure, numerous times over many years, but a team of visiting teachers and administrators visit the district and really conduct a study around an area of interest of the district. Because of the leadership change and just the change in general that we've experienced over, really when Gary was still here, we have deferred a visit. We didn't, in consultation this summer with Marty Brooks, the executive director, we didn't want to defer yet another year, and so we felt like we're at a point in time where we can bring in a smaller group and help us look at where we are in our implementation of our English language arts curriculum. And so we're calling that a mini consultancy in preparation for a full visit that'll take place in 1819. And so I just wanted to make the board aware that that will be happening. So we'll have a group here in November over a period of 2 days, and they'll be working with us to look at our implementation, help us craft kind of our essential questions, which will inform the visit in the subsequent year, and then to conduct some visitations to classrooms. Anything else you'd want to add?
I would just like to add, in thinking about this, 2 years from now, we will be back to reviewing English language arts K to 12. So I thought it would be good the year before to have a full visit from Tri-State to inform that curriculum. And this year, what they're going to do is basically help us prepare for that visit next year.
Thanks very much. We move on to Wilton Public Schools strategic goals.
Right, so this is our first board meeting of the year, and I think ritualistically, it's important that we take an opportunity to go back and to just look at our vision that we'd established some years ago that's guiding our efforts, to look at the theories of action that are written in service to that vision, and then to look at the strategic instructional objectives. I am proposing to the board that we amend our strategic instructional objectives, and for a very good reason, based on the data presentation you just heard. So in beginning with the vision, if you don't mind, I'll read it again. What we're committed to is having all Wilton graduates be innovators, collaborators, and creative and critical thinkers who are high achieving, socially responsible, civic-minded, and have internalized the virtues of compassion and empathy. All of those indicators are indicators that a group of us agreed on were most important in thinking about what students need to exhibit in terms of, in order to be successful as they move into their post-secondary experiences. we agreed that we want our instructional program to meet the demands of a globally interconnected society by providing a rigorous and comprehensive holistic educational experience. Again, speaking to that notion of the whole child and the kinds of opportunities we want to provide to them through curricular and extracurricular activities. And finally, consequently, we want our public schools to be recognized as a premier, dynamic, learner-focused district that leads our nation in educational excellence. For me, our district vision, and there are echoes of that in the various school visions and mission statements, is very important because it keeps us focused on those skills and attributes that we think kids need to have and need to exhibit. And so in order to bring that vision to life, we ought to see evidence of that in not only our student achievement, but also in the way that we operationalize curriculum. So to get there, we've drafted a theory of action, which you are familiar with. There were in the one that we adopted a year ago, 2 pieces to that theory of action. The first really speaks to the district adopting a personalized, student-centered approach to teaching and learning, with the understanding that if we do that well, students will acquire the knowledge, skills, and dispositions as they are, some of them anyway, articulated in the vision, that students need for success in the 21st century. The second piece to that really spoke to our theory of action around our departments and how we intend to organize the work of special services, of curriculum and teaching, of technology, and of the finance and operations office in support of the theory of action around instruction in the instructional objectives. And so our goal here in service to that coherence was to have all of our central office departments directly connect their work to the instructional core, with the understanding that if we do that well, students, teachers, and administrators will have the time, resources, and support they need to personalize teaching and learning. So flowing from that theory of action, we crafted a series of objectives, which we spoke about quite a bit last year. So the first, and you heard quite a bit of conversation about that objective tonight, was to create trusting, respectful, and supportive relationships with students and families. I thought Lauren spoke to the primacy of that objective very well. Simply put, if kids don't feel safe in school, they're not available to learn. And we know not only that they need to feel safe, they need to feel strongly connected to the adults that work with them every day. Then beyond that, we crafted 2 additional instructional objectives that were really high leverage in that they speak to kind of the DNA of how schools go about their work. One was to use the principles of universal design to develop curriculum instructional frameworks, and then the second was to design and implement high-quality performance assessments. So in thinking about implementation, Chuck presented to you a year or so ago an implementation plan phased out over a number of years, where the first several stages were to explore and to garner investment in those objectives, to learn about them and what it actually means, and then prepare for implementation. As you also know, we got quite a bit of feedback from our staff who really didn't feel like they had any sense of agency in choosing those, or for many, an understanding of actually what they meant. And so in reflecting on that feedback, I think it became very clear that we needed to just stop any implementation plans and go back and revisit these. And that's part of our plan this year, is to spend time in conversation, exploring why we believe these are important and why we think these are the strategies that are going to lead us to achieve our vision, and then have some conversation over the course of this year and beyond about what those mean and what they could mean for staff. In the proposed revision of our theories of action and strategic instructional objectives, based on what you heard tonight, we came to an understanding that the way that we have been operationally distinguishing some of the work, we were, for better or for worse, thinking about strategic work and then thinking about work that is business as usual in school districts. And so the business as usual work is that annual goal setting and effort around improving student achievement. What became very clear as we worked through this past school year was that they were artificially disconnected, and that in fact the work that we need to and want to do with staff around improving student achievement is indeed strategic. And so after those conversations with the district leadership team, Chuck and I went back and Chuck recrafted a theory of action, and we rewrote a goal specifically addressing academic achievement, improving academic achievement for students. So I'm asking the board to consider that, and then at our next meeting, I'll be asking the board for a motion to adopt this as our set of strategic instructional objectives. I think it's important to understand that when considering that second theory of action around working with classroom teachers, this is not a new initiative and shouldn't be considered as a new initiative. It's not new work. It's work that's been ongoing in various stages in all of our buildings. I actually think Dr. Mitchell at Cider Mill has been, now she's in year 5 already, Jen, really started this when she got here. And so I consider some of the achievement data that we're seeing coming out of Cider Mill as a leading indicator of the success of that work around working with staff through the IETs, the instructional effectiveness teams, where they have an opportunity to participate in inquiry cycles and look at their learning data, kind of review that together, and then go and practice new strategies to raise achievement. So we're codifying that work that's already been going on in our set of theories of action and we're hoping to anyway, our instructional objectives. Would you add anything, Dr. Smith?
No. That very well. I'm kind of previewing what we're going to be talking about next
week
meeting around the action plans.
Great. Questions, comments? Wonderful. We now move on to review and discuss Regulation 6141, curriculum design modification and improvement.
That's, do you want to take
that one?
If you don't mind.
All right, so you'll notice that we're proposing a relatively small change to the 6141, but it actually is pretty significant. This kind of harkens back to what Lori was saying before. We're having some difficulty tracking resources, both textbooks and digital resources and materials. So this is an attempt by me to put into place a process where we can track those and where people can make requests for changes. You know, when I get a request to change a textbook, it's out of context from a 6141, right? So I want all of these requests to be tracked, monitored, and if any changes are coming about, to do it within the 6141 process. And so we're adding information that will enable me to do that. Moving forward, I'm going to suggest that we do 6141s for every single course and curriculum area K to 12. That way we will have on record what our curriculum looks like. You will see it, you will approve it, you will know what the myriad of resources that we have. And if somebody comes back with a request for a change, they will modify the 6141 so that we can put it into a meaningful context. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Do we have the resources to do this?
Well, when people do a 6141, they just need to tell us over the course of the 5 years what resources are they expecting that they will need.
So you're not anticipating we'll need to add people or technology to make this happen?
You should.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I think, can I add just a piece on that? Because I think one just cultural change that we've been trying to implement here over the last few years is making sure the board has opportunity to examine the resources, the curriculum. And so Lori and Laura, through Teaching and Learning, have been doing that. And this is just kind of the next step in that evolution, so we can better track all of those resources and, as Chuck said, build that database.
And it'll be going forward, so it's not, you know.
Yeah, I'm not going to
and it-
retroactively do
right.
this as we.
Right.
And it works with the curriculum reviews, which are, you know.
Perfect. Wonderful.
When do you expect that you would have a comprehensive list of all of our
When we've gone through the complete curriculum.
2097.
in our lifetime?
It's a 5-year cycle. So
5 years, thank you.
I can come back to the board by then.
That's right.
So we'll need a Are you done with that piece?
Yes.
We move on to policy and regulation 6141, 321, student responsibility use policy for use of district technology.
Great. So with this policy, we're proposing that we just remove policy 6150, which was the current acceptable policy for technology use, and replace it with 6141, which corresponds with the CABE nomenclature and also serves a couple of our ends. Number one, it kind of cleans up what we've been establishing as policy versus regulation. So a lot of that regulation language that's in the old 6150 policy is now moved to the regulation of 6141. And then also updates our expectations based on our digital learning plan. So there are provisions for BYOD in the policy. There's a language reflection of our ready access approach to this work. There's also a more explicit statement about how we are managing parental permission. And so this was a practice that the district has had. I just don't think it was spelled out very explicitly in the regulation. And that's it. We're assuming that as we are providing these digital resources, we're assuming that parents grant their access to their kids unless they very specifically opt out. And so we've been working through a process this year to really be clear with parents so we know who is opting in and when they opt in, what they're opting into, and those who are opting out, what they're opting out from. So the policy and regulation explains all that. We also at length try to define our terms about what we mean in terms of district-provided digital learning devices, passwords, and then just expanding on the expectations around digital resource use in school. Chris, did I miss anything?
No.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, to what degree is this policy or language from this policy in a student handbook? It's not this entire policy is in their handbook.
The reg is in the rights and responsibilities. It is.
In the entire policy?
The reg is.
Okay, yeah, but there's other language in, I mean, this is a pretty extensive,
Yes.
thing. I mean, is this communicated or given to all students outside of the handbook? So they have the entire,
Oh, it's on the website.
it's on the website, yeah, for students.
I mean,
Yeah.
some of the, so with students, I mean, I think Fran can speak to that through the online safety boot
Right.
camps that they were running in school.
Yeah.
They've been addressing these various pieces, and
Okay.
Fran was really instrumental. We spent a long time.
Because this is an extensive policy. This covers just about
Yes.
all of it. I can't think of any base that's not covered here and just.
We also had a student-friendly version of this. that
Right,
we-
thank you for the reminder.
Okay, good, great.
Question under the parental permission. As a parent, how do I know what network access websites or whatever that my child is going to? Like, how do I even know whether or not I want to opt out?
Fran's had a lot of those conversations. So do you want to just give us a summary of the conversations you've had?
Sure. Should I go up and share?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
So the options basically are three. The first one is I don't want my child to be part of the network, which is everything, all technology within the school. That's Wi-Fi, that's using any apps, resources, et cetera. It's basically using the computers and devices. The second opt-out is the use of the G Suite, Google Apps for education. And the third one is really, it has to do with pictures on the web and that type of privacy. So that really encompasses everything. So if the default is basically that as a parent, you're giving your child permission to use the network. That's the opt-out part of it.
So it's not an individual thing that one day in a history class or whatever, my child logs on to a website that if I had known about this website, I wouldn't necessarily want my child on that
So
website.
part of that, and there is a lot of language, as you were saying, in there, is our filtering. So we do have filtering within the school that ensures that certain sites that are inappropriate, that should not be seen by children, aren't. We have to follow the SIPA law, which is the Children's Internet Protection Act, and the COPA laws, which are also the privacy laws.
Right.
And so that's my reassurance as a parent,
Yeah.
that all the teachers and all the staff are following.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's all, we also make clear in the regulation that, students who have the capacity to access the internet outside of our network, if they're on their data network on their phone, we don't have a way of regulating that, and so we just are not assuming any responsibility for doing that. Our practice is to educate and instruct and.
That's right.
And parents should
bring
know that
along
there are certain websites that have been blocked on our network.
Yeah, we've had that as part of the parent meetings that we did last spring, and we will continue. We will have more parent meetings where we will talk about that.
Fran, do you know, just anecdotally, how many complete opt-outs, no network we have across the district?
Maybe a couple.
Yeah, so relatively few. And I think, the privacy concerns that we heard earlier tonight are really important, and that's something, I would say to everybody, we take it very, very seriously.
Absolutely.
And I would commend Fran on her work and her diligence in, following up on that and making sure that our process has integrity.
Thank you very much. No further questions? We move on to the action items. First is discuss and approve the healthy food certification.
Great, so this is a motion that we ask for annually, and I would ask that the board make a motion to certify that Wilton Public Schools will not adhere to the Connecticut nutrition standards for the 2017-2018 school year.
I'll make that motion.
Great. So as you may recall, annually, boards must certify each year in its annual application to the Connecticut State Department of Education whether all food items made available for sale will meet the Connecticut nutrition standards. So we don't follow those guidelines. We find them to be very restrictive, and so we just opt out, and by board vote, we need to notify the state.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained? Passes unanimously. We move on to discuss and approve CSDE Bureau of Health, Nutrition, Family Services, and Adult Education Child Nutrition Program and authorized signatures change form.
Yes, and so we're just asking that we add Ann Kelly Lenz as a signatory. So I'd like a motion to approve that change.
Motion to approve. Looking for second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. We now move on to the action item that I brought up at the beginning of the meeting. With my stepping down as chairman, we need to vote to name a new chairman. So do we have, as we do in our organizational meeting, I'll ask for nominations, and then by secret ballot, we will vote. We'll start first with chairman, and I'd like to make a motion to nominate Chris Finkelstein to be the new chairman of the Board of Education.
I second that.
Is there any discussion or other nominations? Okay, seeing none, we shall all vote.
Stay here.
I know.
Fold.
Because,
I was gonna fold mine into 12 pieces.
I know.
Chris Finkelstein, 5.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. We now move on to, because Chris vacates the position as vice chair, we need to nominate a vice chairman. Is there any nomination for vice chairman?
I would like to nominate Laura Schwamm.
I'll second
Vice
that.
Chairman.
Is there any discussion or any other nominations? Seeing none, let's vote. Faster, Ryan.
Okay, here. Okay.
Laura Schwamm. 5-0.
With Laura vacating the position of secretary, we now need to vote in a new secretary, and I'd like to nominate Laura.
I need to do that.
Oh, never mind.
I nominate Lori Rusting.
A second?
Any further discussion? Any further nominations? We'll vote. Thank you. Not if I sit down there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Some secretary.
Lucille and I will get along quite well.
Lori Rusting, 5-0.
You ceremoniously pass the gavel, and I'll tweet a picture.
Sure, I can do that.
Watch out for the flash on the way.
She touched it, yay!
Thank you. I would just like to thank the board for this tremendous honor. It truly is something I never in my life thought I would be. And looking back, Lori, Laura, and I all joined the board at the same time 6 years ago. And now we're running the joint. And Bruce, what can we say? Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve as your vice chairman these past few years. We have two of our Board of Ed candidates here tonight, and one of the first things you learn when you go through Board of Ed orientation is that when you get a chairman, you keep that person for as long as you possibly can. And we were blessed to keep you for 6 years. You truly, truly have a passion for this, and it's just no exaggeration. You truly are a Wilton warrior. So thank you, and I know how difficult it's been with you the last few months, spread very thin, but you did give us 110%. So thank you, and we will carry on. And
wonderful. Well, I'm not going anywhere except down to that seat.
We've got you till November. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you. We're not done yet.
We're not done yet.
Except you now are chairman, so you get to finish the meeting.
Yeah, great. I have to go to better classes.
Next meeting.
The pressure. The next meeting will be on October 12th at Miller Driscoll, which will be preceded by a community open house of the beautiful new school.
Where at Miller Driscoll are we doing the meeting?
I think we
The multi-purpose room.
And so which entrance should we?
Main entrance.
Yeah.
The main entrance, one entrance, okay.
I also want to direct you to the Wilton Public Schools web address, www.wiltonwps.org. Before we adjourn at this time, are there any comments from anyone from the public who would like to address us? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second? All right, all in favor? All right. Thank you.
So, tomorrow.
I will, I promise. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for getting me.